Welcome to this tutorial, and we'll be talking about the distributive property. So to give you an overview, we're really used to doing problems like this. So you know automatically about, let's say you have bedmiss, right? And we know that the B for bedmiss is bracket, so you solve whatever is in the brackets first, and then you do the exponents, right? That's for example, a to the 2. Then you solve exponents first, and then after you do division for the D, and then multiplication for the M, addition and subtraction. We know the deal. But what we're going to do is, using the distributive property, we're going to solve what 2 times 3 plus 5 is, and that's what the notation is. Whenever 2 is beside brackets, you know it's being multiplied by that thing. Now the easy thing to do in here is we can easily solve using bedmiss. So first we see brackets, so we want to solve what's in the brackets first. So the best thing to do is 3 plus 5, start that first. That's going to be 8, and just put some brackets around that 2 because you know it's still in brackets. And the 2, again, still going to be on the outside. So now you just solve what 2 times 8 is, and that's going to be 16, okay? So we solved that. That's a bit of a intro there. But now we're going to try something a bit different, and in this case we have x and y variables involved. Now variables do not add to each other unless they're the same. If you have a 3x plus a 3x, you're going to get a 6x, but I'll show you in a minute. So essentially, using the distributive property, we're going to multiply this 2 outside the brackets by whatever is inside the brackets, right? So we're not necessarily going to use bedmiss here because we can't add 3x plus 5y, right? Unless if the y was an x, then we would add it. But in this case, you just leave it like that, and all you have to do is multiply the 2 by the 3x and the 2 and by the 5y. And since the operation is addition, your result will be adding the product of 2 times 3x and 2 times 5y, okay? So let's try that. 2 times 3x, that's going to be, so again, when you're multiplying a number by a term with a number and a variable, you always just multiply the numbers first. So 2 times 3 is 6, and then you add that variable after, so that x, right? So it's going to be 6x. You don't omit the x, you keep the x, okay? Same thing with the 5y times the 2. 2 times the 5y, so again I'm adding that to 2 times 5y, so I just do 2 times 5 first. What's that? That's going to be 10. And then I just add the y after, because look, 2 times 5y, there's no y with the 2, so I just treat the y like it's by itself, okay? So my result is going to be 6x plus 10y for this. Now, before I get into the last example, I just want to highlight an exponent rule, and that rule is a number multiplied by itself will always get you a, well, let's say if the number is, let's say the number, this letter A is representing any number, okay? So any number to the power to the exponent of 2 is just simply going to be A, that number times itself, right? So if you have 2 to the 2, obviously you know that's going to be 2 times 2, which is 4. So that's the same thing that goes on with letters. If you have, for example, y, and I multiply y by itself, I'm just going to get y squared, right? So that's the basic idea there. So now we're ready to do the very last problem, and in fact I would encourage you to pause the video and see if you can give it a try yourself. So here we have 4xy multiplied by whatever's in this brackets, x plus 5y, okay? So I'm going to give you a chance to pause the video now and see if you can try it. Okay, so now that you've given it a try, let's go through this. Remember, we have both numbers and variables in this problem. So what we want to do first is, you know, by the distributive property, we'll multiply whatever is outside the brackets by the first term in the brackets and by the second term inside the brackets as well. And again, the operation is addition, so you know you're going to be adding, okay, for your result. So let's say we have 4xy times x, okay? So what is that going to be? Well, you have, and again, the x over here, it doesn't have anything in front of it, but that doesn't mean that it's a 0. It's actually an invisible 1, right? Remember that always. There's always an invisible 1 in front of the variable. So I'm actually multiplying the numbers first, okay? So 4 times 1 is actually going to be 4, okay? Then I multiply the letters by each other, right? So I see an x here and I see an x here. So I'm actually going to be multiplying x by this x here. So using the exponent rules, an x times another x is just going to leave me as x squared, right? Now let's look here. You have a y, but oh no, we don't have a y beside this x. So what are we going to do? Well, we're just going to leave it as y, right? Because it's like we're multiplying y by nothing there. Again, you can think of this as the invisible one, but ideally there's nothing there, so you just leave the y there, okay? So now we're done with this part here. We're finished with this part I'm underlining. Now we're going to do 4xy multiplied by 5y, okay? So let's try that. We have, first you have to multiply the numbers by each other. So 4 times 5 is going to be 20. Whoops. It's going to be 20. And then you multiply the letters now, okay? Now look, we'd have an x, but there's no x in this 5y term, okay? So in that case, you just leave it as x, okay? Just leave it as x if there's only one x available. But I see a y here, and I see a y over here as well. So a y times a y will give me y squared, right? So this is our answer. We just solved this. Now a trick is, let's say for example, if I just go back a slide, let's say for example I were to have a negative sign in front of this 4xy. So what's going to happen now? Well, remember, this is actually a negative sign. I don't know if I say minus, but it's negative. So then you have, in this case, a negative 4 as your number, right? Being multiplied by this invisible 1, okay? It's multiplied by this invisible 1. So you know that negative 4 times 1 is going to be just negative 4, okay? And remember, a negative times a positive will always get you a negative, right? It's the same idea. You're still multiplying the numbers by each other, but the sign changes if you have two signs that are different. Then you just do basic multiplication like you did with the letters. You do the x times the x, so you have the x squared. Okay, whoops, my x is a bit unneat there. Then you have a y times nothing. That's just going to be a y, okay? But here's the trick. Remember, we have a plus sign here. So think of this as plus 5. Well, the 5, ideally, ignore the plus sign. So the plus sign is only meant that the operation is addition, okay? But focus on this 5 here. This 5 does not have a negative sign in front of it, right? So what does that mean? As you guessed correctly, it's a positive sign in front of this 5, an invisible positive sign, okay? So I'm going to be multiplying, if I'm multiplying the negative 4xy by the 5y, I'm actually multiplying the negative 4 times the positive 5, right? So in this case, if I add, so again, since my operation is addition, that stays the same. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the second part here in brackets, okay? So you have, now let's do this term times 5y. Negative 4 times positive 5, so that's going to be negative 20, right? So 4 times 5 is 20, but you have a negative and positive sign, so it's going to be negative, okay? And then you do the same multiplication of the variables. Then you have x, and then you have y squared, okay? Now, putting this together, you have negative 4x squared y plus bracket negative 20xy to the 2, all right? Now remember, if I say x squared or x to the 2, that's the same thing, okay? But remember, we have a plus sign here and we have a negative sign here. The best thing to do is actually just turn this into a negative sign, okay? Should turn this into a minus sign because positive plus and the positive thing, the sign, and the negative sign just turn out to be a negative sign. So really what you're rewriting is negative 4x squared y minus 20x, whoops, oh, I kind of messed that up there. But ideally what we're trying to do is the result of that, oh, I messed that up there. Ideally, I remember, so the answer is going to be 4x squared, negative 4x squared y minus 20 xy squared, okay? This was the answer to negative 4xy times x plus 5y. Because plus and negative positive and negative go together to become a negative sign, okay, which makes the operation a subtraction, all right? So that is the end of this video, and thank you for your attention.